The Torah reading commentary today is Genesis 12:1 to 17:27, Isaiah 40 verse 27 to 41:16, and John 8:51 to 58. And ironically, it's about a promise. So fits right in, isn't God? He's amazing the way he does this. So the reading starts with a call of Abram to go to a land that God will show him. Okay? And he takes his nephew Lot with him, and they actually go to the land of Canaan. And we're going to follow his adventure a little bit from his call to the land. So if you turn to Genesis chapter 12, I'll start with verses 1 to 3. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Now, if you were to ask me, what is one of the key scriptures to understanding God's plan and purposes, I would say this is definitely one of them. So God is giving Abram the big overview of his whole plan and promise. So I'm going to continue on with verse 4 to 7. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Yeah, 75. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So Abraham believed God's call to him, which we heard in verses 1 to 3. So he left everything he knew and set out in obedience. And once God arrives in the land, God appears to him and says, "To your offspring, I will give this land." So there's two parts of a promise that Abraham would have understood. First of all, that he is going to have a child, and the second, that he is going to actually possess this land. And it seems pretty simple. But I wonder how, what he was thinking about. Maybe he was having all these scenarios go through his head about how this was all going to happen. I think we all understand that. But we're going to see here that it's not quite as straightforward as it sounded. There are events that occur that actually seem to contradict this promise. But instead of actually setting Abraham back, he chooses to believe God, and God uses these events to build Abraham's faith and also to bless him. So we're going to just look at a few examples here. Chapter 12, verses 10 to 13. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, "I know that you're a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." So the contradiction here is that in order to survive the famine, Abraham actually has to leave the very place, the very land God has told him to go to, and go to Egypt. So it seems like he's actually moving away from the promise and not towards it. And he's very wary, he's fearful for his safety. But if you read the rest of the story, God not only preserves his life, but he actually uses the situation to prosper him. And both Abraham and Lot eventually returned to Canaan much richer than when they left. So all seems to be going well again. However, all this prosperity actually causes strife between Abraham and Lot's herdsmen. So let's read chapter 13, verses 8 to 12. Then Abram said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the whole land before you? Separate yourself from me. If you take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if you take the right hand, then I will go to the left." And Lot lifted up his eyes and saw that the Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt in the direction of Zoar. This was before the land destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself all the Jordan Valley, and Lot journeyed east. Thus they separated from each other. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled among the cities of the valley and moved his tent as far as Sodom. So in order to preserve this relationship, Abram ends up giving Lot the best land, okay? And it was well-watered, it was lush, and it really had the promise of success in it. So Abraham was left with Canaan, and by implication, that was a land that was not quite as nice as the Jordan Valley, the part that Lot had chosen. Also, it seems that the land God promised him is actually being reduced. What might have Abraham been thinking here? Maybe that Lot was like an offspring. God promised him an offspring, so he's sort of like a child. So maybe it's okay he gets the land. Or maybe wondering why the fulfillment of the promise had been so close upon the return to Egypt, only to be snatched away again. Maybe he was a little discouraged. However, right after Lot leaves, the Lord speaks to Abraham again. We're going to continue with verse 14. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look to the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward," eastward is where Lot was, "and westward, for all the land that you see I will give to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your offspring also can be counted. Arise, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I will give it to you." So God seems to be addressing any questions that Abraham might have had in his heart. God encourages Abraham that yes, the promise still stands firm. He is going to do it. And I do find it rather ironic that the land, that beautiful land that Lot chose, actually ends up getting made desolate, because that was where Sodom and Gomorrah was. So in all these examples, there always seemed to be a setback to this promise. In some cases, Abraham tried to address them himself, but God always showed up and either encouraged Abraham or he redirected events back on track according to his plan. In each case, Abraham believed and moved forward. Now we're going to go to the book of Isaiah now. And as we know in the book of Isaiah, he prophesies much about Israel's coming afflictions, about discipline and eviction from the land. However, Isaiah also prophesies about events following this time of sorrow, about a return to the land, and about a time of hope. So I'm going to read Isaiah 41, verses 8 to 10. "But you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the offspring of Abraham, my friend, you whom I took from the ends of the earth and called from its farthest corners, saying to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you off. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So here God is referring to Israel as Abraham's offspring. So this is actually a continuation of God's promise to Abraham. And even when the promise looks like a failure, because Israel did get evicted from the land, God encourages because he is faithful. He's going to keep his promise. Now I want to take you to John now, John chapter 8. And in this situation, the Jews are questioning Jesus about who he is, and they're arguing with him. I'll read verses 51 to 58, chapter 8. And Jesus is speaking. "Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death." The Jews said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets died. Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I'd be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." So the Jews said to him, "You are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham?" Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." So when Jesus says that Abraham rejoiced that he would see his day, I suggest that he's saying that he, that's Jesus, is the fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham. The Jews asked who he was, and he answered them. Now, the Abrahamic covenant, remember, is only conditional on God himself, and so he actually has to keep his own word alone. Jesus is I am. He alone is the answer and fulfillment to his covenant with Abraham and his offspring. And in 2 Corinthians 1:20 it says, "For all the promises of God find their yes in him." That's in Jesus. And we know that Jesus is coming again to complete what he set in motion with respect to his promises. And Abraham didn't see the fullness of the promise in his lifetime. And as part of his spiritual offspring, we are still waiting on it. So what can we glean for our own lives here? On a personal level, Abraham actually did see a child born to him, an offspring, and that was a miracle. And he did live well in the land that God brought him to. See, he actually saw the faithfulness of God himself while alive on earth, and he had faith that God would accomplish the rest of the promise after he died. And for me personally, this tells me that any promise that the Lord has made to me will be completed, but not to be discouraged by events that seem to be leading me in an opposite direction. I am going to see his faithfulness in my own life. That's what's been modeled here. And even though my life will end physically, God's promises to me will continue until they're fulfilled. And think of family here. And Abraham kept believing God and lived what I would have imagined a life of hope and expectancy. He chose his attitude and lived many good days in spite of what have probably seemed as many setbacks. And somehow, God always showed up at the right time to encourage him and inspire him. So I want to keep faith like Abraham did, and I encourage you to do the same. Amen.